Hari Om. Let's start with a prayer. Om Samasta Jana Kalyani Niratam Karunamayam Namomi Chinmayam Devam Sadgurum Brahma Vidwaram Vasudeva Sutam Devam Kamsajanura Mardanam Devaki Paramanandam Krishnam Vande Jagadgurum Tvameva Mata Cha Pitattvameva Tvameva Bandhuscha Sakatvameva Tvameva Vidya Dravidam Tvameva Tvameva Sarvam Mamadeva Deva Tvameva Sarvam Gurudeva Deva. Hari Om. We are doing the question and answers on Vedanta, and one of the questions is that if Brahman cannot be defined, then how is scripture defines Brahman? Because pages and pages of our Brahman is being described in the Vedanta, and which cannot be described. And so the question is always a puzzling question. So the question is how Brahman cannot be defined only because Brahman is infinite. Infinite, no definition can be possible. And that's why we said the words cannot reach there, and the mind also cannot reach there. It is something beyond, but at the same time, then how do we know? So, but Brahman is defined by the scriptures using what is called tatastha lakshanam, incidental qualifications it uses. What's an incidental qualification? And that's called tatastha lakshanam versus the swarupa lakshanam. So, and the tatastha lakshanam means indicatory definitions. So a simple example is, so we want to show Mr. John's house or Sir Narasimha Rao's house, and if you look at it, particularly in some of this, every house look alike from a distance. So which is John's house? Hey, I want to know where is John's house. John says, and then looking how to show him, and suddenly one crow sits on that John's house. Now see, so you see the crow there? Yes. The house where the crow is sitting is a John's house. Now he got the definition. Next time he's going to go, he cannot go to, where is John's house? Let's see where the crow is going to sit down. That's not an indicatory definition, only a tatastha. That's an indicatory definition, not its intrinsic nature. There won't be any crow all the time sitting there on John's house. So that is convenient to define so that it can differentiate all others. So, scripture uses the tatastha lakshanam. What is the tatastha lakshanam for Brahman? That which cannot differentiate from all other things, just like John's house can be differentiated using the crow. But now what is that crow type definition for the Brahman which can uniquely mention what that is? That is essentially Janma Jasya Yataha. That is the Brahma Sutra defines Janma Adi. So that is the birth. That means it is a creator, sustainer and annihilator of the whole universe. Because universe cannot be different from Brahman. And if anything universe that has to rise from Brahman, sustained by Brahman and goes back into Brahman. But Brahman cannot, nothing can come out in Brahman. Why? Because it's infinite. So infinite cannot produce anything, no creation, because creation involves a modification. So how is this accounted? So we call it apparent creation. So this is apparent creation and an apparent definition to distinguish what is Brahman. So that from which the whole universe came, by which it is sustained, into which it goes back. And that is called the Upadana Karanam. Because you say Brahman became the universe as though, and that is apparently became, and therefore like gold became ornaments. Became is used is in the sense of material cause. Goldsmith doesn't become ornaments. So gold became ornament because it's a material. So in the case of Brahman becomes material, the whole universe itself. This Tadakshata Vahusyam Praja Eti, it saw, and that means it's a conscious entity. It was one without a second, and it let me become many, and it became many. And using that as an incidental qualification, because it's not real qualification, no qualification can be used for Brahman, but for as long as you are in the creation and asking a question to him only, a scripture provides a incidental qualification, and that comes from the Upanishad. Yato va imani bhutani jayante ena jatani jivanti yat prayam chapisham vishanti tad vijnasasva. That has to be inquired. How? From which the whole universe came. Yato va imani bhutani jayante ena jatani jivanti, from which it is sustained. That means it's a material cause, and into which it goes back. And that is Brahman, is an indicatory definition to define what Brahman is. And that also is defined in terms of Anta Pragyam, Navai Pragyam, Nobhayata Pragyam. For Atma also it is defined in the same way. You cannot define Atma self, because any definition of belongs to object, not the subject. So Atma cannot be defined, Brahman cannot be defined. And these two are equated in the scriptures, and scripture says Satyam Jnanam Anantam Brahma. So it's there, Swarupa Lakshanam is given, that it is of the nature of existence, is the nature of knowledge or consciousness, and is the nature of limitless, and that's called Satyam Jnanam. They are not Lakshanas, they are not gunas, and some Acharya says they are gunas and of Brahman, because they have objectified the Brahman, and these are attributes. He is a conscious entity, so consciousness is an attribute of Brahman also. But scripture also says consciousness is infinite, Prajnanam Brahma. So Prajnanam Brahma is defining in a straightforward, in a converse way, the Brahman. It doesn't say Brahman is Prajnanam. Converse means it's a very rigorous and it's necessary and sufficient qualification in mathematics. When we say sweet is, sugar is sweet, is a necessary but not sufficient, because any sweet is not a sugar. So sweet is not sugar, but sugar is sweet. That's necessary. So there is no Swarupa Lakshanam, and Swarupa Lakshanam you have to give a chemical formula also, and there are also some isotopes with the same chemical formula, all that will go on. But Brahman is Satyam, Anam, Anantam are pure indicatory definitions, because Jnanam is knowledge. Knowledge means what? Knowledge cannot be defined. All they can say is knowledge of physics, knowledge of chemistry, knowledge of this, knowledge of that. Objectified knowledge only can be defined. Pure knowledge without objectification cannot be defined. So Brahman belongs to not an object, but it is the infiniteness that is beyond any limitations of Satyam Jnanam Anantam Brahma. So hence the Brahman is only defined by indicatory difference, Lakshyartha, and therefore one has to prepare to look at, using Lakshyartha, go beyond what is indicated. And some of the mystic language is used. It is the eye of the eye, mind of the mind, and so on. So what is the mind of the mind? And he says, this is how my teacher taught us also. So that which, because of which mind is also become a knowledgeable entity. That is what essentially Sakshi or witnessing consciousness that we discussed before. And that is Brahman, which cannot be defined, but yet scripture defines it using Lakshyartha, indicatory definition, pointing in the direction for one to contemplate and discover. That's how the Brahman is defined. With that we stop. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyati Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vasishyati. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Harihi Om Shri Gurubhyo